Hi there, thank you for joining us and welcome to the next session for Global Partnership Day. My name is Tara Lusk and I am the APAC Marketing Manager at PartnerEyes. I'm delighted to be joined today by panellists from leading travel brands and one of Australia's biggest publishers to discuss taking flight, the return of travel partnerships. With that in mind, I would like to introduce our panellists, starting with Amy Hourigan, Senior Partner Marketing Manager at Wotif. Amy is a marketing leader with more than 10 years of digital marketing experience, specializing in SEO, content, social media, and affiliates, as well as digital and marketing strategy. In her current role at Expedia Group, Amy leads Wotif's partnerships. Her focus is on working with partners to deliver mutually beneficial commercial and brand outcomes. Joining Amy is Sophie Sticklin, Head of Client Services at Cashrewards. Sophie has over 10 years of experience within the industry, specialising in the affiliate space and working across both the UK and Australian market. She is currently the Client Services Director for Cashrewards, one of Australia's leading cashback sites, working with clients on the strategy and execution of their campaigns. Lastly, we have Joanne Heggie, who's the Head of Marketing ANZ at Trip.com. Joanne joined Trip.com in December 2017 as Head of Marketing for Australia. Prior to this, she managed the social media team for the Flight Centre Travel Group, Australia, and also spent a few years in London where she led various digital marketing teams at both Benefit Cosmetics and GHD Hair. So I would like to say a massive thank you to our panellists, and we're really excited to have you on board for the discussion today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tara. It's lovely to be here.
All right, let's jump straight in. So it has certainly been a challenging year for the travel industry. So I am curious to understand how partnerships has been able to support the uncertainty that's faced the travel industry over the last 12 months. And perhaps, Amy, you could start us off with that one.
Sure. So I think for us, the channel is highly flexible. It was one of our first channels to be reactivated when domestic travel started to get back on the radar for people in that COVID, re-emergence period. It's lower risk with the CPA model, very simply, that allows us to gauge very quickly, if there's uptick in that travel appetite, and it lets us sort of capitalize on that very quickly. But I think, through all of that, we could only do that with the patience and that adaptability of our partners as well. So I think the two kind of went hand in hand, especially in those early days when there was those sudden border closures and everyone was trying to figure out, how they could operate around that. I think everyone worked very closely together in this channel to help the travel re-emergence.
Yeah. And have you seen something on your end, Joanne? Is that what you've seen as well?
Yeah, I was gonna agree very much with Amy. That was very similar to what we saw. Also, there was lots of channels that essentially we had to turn off or pause during this period because obviously, you're not getting the ROI that you normally would. And so then this was one channel that we could actually keep going throughout the period of those challenging, I suppose, like the really hard times at the start and also the border closures and fluctuations. At least then we knew that we were able to manage everything in terms of cancellations and ROI and so forth. But also on that, like it's been quite flexible in terms of the types of product we've been able to use. So we were predominantly very flights focused with our business, and obviously there was reduced capacity, also reduced demand and appetite. So then we made sure we were adaptable and moved with the different types of product that we could see the demand for, and that was a platform that was able to support us throughout that period.
And I would love to hear the partner's perspective on that as well, Sophie. So I guess, how is Cashrewards responding as a partner, and are you and what are you offering travel brands to help them get back on their feet?
Yeah, so I totally agree with what everyone's really saying, and we've seen a lot of brands come back to us and reactivating this channel early, which I think just really speaks volumes of it. We, as a partner, really want to support both our travel brands and members as they start booking travel again, and just making sure that Cashrewards at the front of mind when people are thinking about their next trip and booking their next trip. So yeah, we've been working really close to align with our brands on what their goals are as they come back and, as we sort of come out of this pandemic. And then obviously sort of looking to really learn and understand from that, but also share what we'd like our outcomes to be, so we can ultimately give our consumers the best experience and offers. So we've done a lot to sort of create an always-on approach with travel. So consistently offering, banners on our homepage, dedicated landing page for travel, and we've continued to keep the consistency of our travel-themed campaigns as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So I would like to talk a little bit around sort of partnership strategy, and I guess looking at the industry as a whole, we have seen travel evolve quite dramatically. So I will kick this question off with you, Joanne. What are the major changes that are affecting the industry, and how have they forced you to sort of adapt or reroute your partnership strategy?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose to speak a little bit more about what I touched on earlier in terms of like the different types of travel products, like that's been a big shift for us. So we're seeing like really short lead times, and then the shift from flights to self-drive, people being more comfortable traveling like close to home and then just jumping in the car. So therefore a bit of previously a decrease in flights, but that's now bouncing back, which is very exciting. People are getting more confident and the lead time is getting a little bit longer. But also in terms of that accommodation shift, people going, oh, I actually prefer a homestay, or I prefer camping or somewhere really rural, and the different destinations people are going to. Like that's been a really big shift. But I think the thing that has actually really impacted the travel industry that we probably weren't expecting is the shift in people's disposable income and what they actually want to spend it on. Previously, people were like, okay, I'm going to allocate this amount of savings for this amount of savings for this, and this amount for my big holiday. Mm-hmm. And then it's been such a shift with people not being able to go anywhere or not being able to plan very far ahead because of the changing border closures and situations. They've shifted a lot of those funds to their home or their car, or, oh, I'm going to, do that renovation I've been planning to do, or build that cubby house I promised the kids. So that's been, now travel is actually competing for people's funds to actually go on holidays. So now we're competing with industries as well, which we hadn't really seen previously.
Yeah, that's a really interesting sort of insight there. And it's something I hadn't thought about. And I'm sure the audience hadn't thought about either. And it's quite a unique, challenge that travel marketers now are facing in the industry. It's quite an interesting insight there.
Yeah, just unprecedented. We didn't think that would be a thing. People love travel and we thought they always would, but now people are doing shorter trips and not necessarily doing the really big trips that they were doing overseas and so forth. So it's been a little bit of a change in that regard.
Definitely. And Amy, is that something What If is noticing as well? Have you had to sort of adapt your partnership strategy in line with these changes?
Yeah, I think we have, but we've also had the benefit of always having had a large domestic focus for our business. So in those early days when everyone was talking about pivoting and finding their new strategy, there was somewhat less of that need for us. We were already, getting Aussies to explore their own backyard and trying to, help them understand the value of that and appreciate what they had, and showcasing some of those hidden gems and things like that. So whilst there was less of that immediate sort of pivot for us, there was definitely, how we activate that with partners, when we activate that with partners, changed a little bit. It became a very noisy marketplace very quickly with everyone talking about domestic travel. Of course they were. So I think we've probably only really dug into how we can do this more intelligently now, or in the later months, not so much early on, but how do we talk to more specific audiences in this busy marketplace? How do we, help communicate to, parents and families specifically? How do we talk to what they want to see and do? How do we talk to, young couples traveling, and what do they want to see and do? I think there's different types of travel that different segments want to do. And for us, it's something we've always wanted to do in the channel a little bit more intelligently, but this has been kind of the big push to explore that with partners in terms of content, in terms of just different channels, in terms of different types of partners. So it's been a real big kind of impetus moment, I think, for us to explore that.
Definitely. There's never been a better time to sort of test and learn and be innovative and try new things with your audience. So absolutely. And what have you seen from your side, Sophie?
Yeah, so we've just really supported the pivot to domestic travel and just the change in people's booking habits. So I think obviously everything's sort of having to be a bit more reactive and agile, as opposed to sort of planning ahead and having that sort of clear plan of what's going to happen. So probably a good example of that was when the New Zealand Australia travel bubble opened. There wasn't really much, I suppose, sort of timings around that and that happening. So we had to sort of work to sort of change a lot of our, you know, our content and messaging to sort of align with that and support what was happening there.
Yeah. So I guess keeping on the topic of partnership strategy, I am curious, and perhaps starting with you, Amy, have there been certain partners or partnerships that have worked well in supporting your strategy?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I said, during this kind of period of change where it's forced us to explore new types of partnerships and partners, we've, you know, specifically looked into more brand-to-brand partnerships. So one example being we work with Samsonite Australia, and we definitely already had an existing relationship with them, and we were exploring, you know, more of a performance-based partnership between the brands. But during the COVID period, they were looking for ways to keep their audience engaged in social, in email. You know, they're not necessarily ready to buy luggage for the big international trip, but how could they keep talking to them about travel and get them, you know, keep them in that dreaming and almost planning phase when they were ready. So, you know, we've started to share more of our content with them and kind of repurpose that for their audience. So that was something new and different for them and really for both parties. And I think it helped us deliver on different sorts of objectives. It helped us reach a new audience, of course. It helped us carry out our own brand messaging, as well as for them delivering on those goals of keeping their audiences engaged in those channels. I think starting to explore beyond just performance was kind of where we started to head with a few of these. And that's just something that I think, you know, down the track, we're going to keep exploring. I think, you know, it means that we need to think about partnerships a little bit differently sometimes. It's not, you know, when we're talking to a different brand's audience, they're not necessarily ready to go purchase a trip on What If tomorrow, because that's not what they turn to Samsonite for. But so how do we look at that funnel? How do we treat that sort of value of that customer? Has been an interesting moment for us. But I would say also, you know, consistently at the same time, our cashback partners, Cash Rewards, have, you know, continued to support our brand and allowed us to be very agile with all of those changing travel situations. So definitely, I think both types of partners have value for us, and it's just been an interesting period to see how we can get both working to deliver on different objectives.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, it's actually amazing to hear how brands and partners have been working together over the last 12 months. So I think, Sophie, perhaps you could explain more on that from the partner side.
Yeah. So we really had one key objective, and that's really to sort of own the travel space as a partner. So we want to be able to sort of show that we can support growth better than other channels and really sort of, you know, go with those ups and downs and being able to sort of lean in to support brands and help them deliver results on that. So we've created, like, obviously it's a fine balance between obviously brand, consumer, whilst obviously navigating like the changing landscape of what's happening. So we've really sort of focused on delving deep into what our brands want to deliver with their strategy and to support their goals, whilst also ensuring that our consumers are engaged and feel that they're getting, as I said previously, like great offers and the right sort of messaging. We have seen travel return well here in Australia. I think we're very lucky. We've got such an amazing country to explore. But there's definitely, we've seen there's a cohort of users that previously booked travel that haven't yet returned. So we've done a bunch of activities to really help engage with those customers that haven't yet become active, but also focusing on those sort of the messaging and making sure we're aligned with those customers that are engaged and actively looking and booking in travel, but whilst making sure that we're then also, you know, doing that engagement piece in market to raise awareness of Cash Rewards and all the great travel brands that we have. So we've really ramped up our campaign activities. I mentioned previously we have like an always on travel approach, but we've also been introducing things like travel-based bonuses. We've done some really good integrated content strategies within our paid media, whilst ensuring that we're keeping our travel brands out and above the line as well.
And
yeah,
I was going to say, Joanne, you know, you mentioned earlier that there was quite a pivot from the international focus to a domestic focus. So I would love to know more about the partners or partnerships that are supporting that strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose there's been a huge shift in where people have been looking for travel, and in that case, we've done a lot of partnerships that we've sort of activated and been working with in the last few months has been with tourism boards, because essentially their job is to try and stimulate travel and domestic travel in this instance. So then they're trying to target distressed areas within their states or regions. So then, you know, a lot of people are happy to go to regional areas, but now the cities are suffering a lot. So how do we get people back into cities to explore the cities on the periods that were, or the days that were previously filled with, you know, international travel or business travel? And there's obviously a lot of that's paused. So yeah, stimulating a lot of that sort of city travel or distressed area travel. It's, you know, not necessarily around the cities for a staycation. So you have to travel 5-6 hours. You know, how can we get people going there? What are the things we can showcase in terms of content? What are the amazing deals we can work with our partners like Cash Rewards to show, okay, like this is a really good deal, actually, you know, stimulate that sort of, demand. Because we've still found that Aussies always love a deal. So that's always going to be something that sort of gets them excited and gets them booking. But people really also want that free cancellation or those flexible options. So, you know, you have to have the combination of both those things. And that's something we always make sure we've been working with in terms of the communication we've been putting out and working with our partners. But also there's been a big shift to mobile. Like people are now not going in the office as much. People are now on their phones a lot more comfortably. Everyone knows what a QR code is, which is good news for a business like mine that's very app and mobile focused. So we've also been trying to work with partners to try and find synergies in mobile. So similar to what Amy was saying, like what are partners that, you know, are very different from sort of a brand to brand focus, but that essentially we have something in common. And for us, it's usually targeting that young online consumer that is, you know, happy to book their travel online, happy to plan their travel online. So we actually did a partnership with BWS, whereby it was to drive app downloads. So not necessarily always trying to drive travel, because similar to what Amy iterated with Samsonite, people are not still always planning and thinking about where they want to go. So you still want to make sure that you're within that consideration phase. So essentially we partnered with them to go, okay, you know, we're going to run a competition where you can win amazing getaway in these beautiful regional wine areas. Download the app to enter. So you can download the Trip.com app, you can download the BWS app, and that drove a huge spike for us in app downloads. And that is another way for us to reach our consumer, because now we can talk to them on their phone in terms of, you know, different deals and different activities and things. And hopefully then they'll consider Trip.com for their future travel.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot going on. Pretty amazing to see how it's, you know, the partners are supporting your strategy as well. So I think, Joanne, just staying with you as well, I think I'd be interested in understanding more about, I guess, like the state of the industry and like any sort of interesting or surprising changes in demand and types of bookings from consumers.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been seeing huge demand in regional areas, and, you know, I'm sure What If has seen this for a long time, but we've very much been a domestic focus. Even pre-COVID, about 70% of our travel was domestic, but we still had a lot of international travel. So now it's gone from, okay, maybe I'm not doing that trip to Singapore, maybe I'm going to Mudgee instead. And Mudgee and Orange in New South Wales anyway have been up 300%, and some other amazing regional areas in Broome, like for instance in WA, or, you know, the inland Queensland, like the hinterland and that sort of thing. So it's been really exciting to see. And there's no shortage of amazing destinations within Australia. So I think it's really been a great time to highlight and show those areas that people previously wouldn't have considered. And they're going, wow, I didn't even know this was, you know, 4 hours drive from where I lived, or this is only an hour flight. So it's a really amazing time for those small regional areas to sort of shine. So I think that and that shift paired with sort of the flexible booking conditions and making sure that people have peace of mind, that's really allowing people to go on some amazing trips within this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much to see on our doorstep that people just have to get out there and see it really. But Sophie, are there any sort of major trends that you're seeing in terms of the partner side?
Yeah, so there's definitely a demand for travel. I think obviously we're seeing majority, 90% of bookings are coming from domestic. The other things that we're seeing is this focus on shorter lead times. So people are generally booking closer to their travel, which obviously is having an impact on like the changing in the travel seasonality and the peaks that we see. Other things that we're seeing is that where previously people were probably booking 7 days, people are booking shorter trips, so more 2 to 3 night stays, which is obviously like having more of an impact on like the average order value of bookings. We're, I suppose, just having that sort of clear focus and really aligning with those key events. So obviously Easter and winter snow, school holidays, and sort of just leaning into like variation of accommodation type. So, obviously where we're looking more domestic, it's more car hire, different accommodation types, experiences, and obviously still the domestic flights as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, I know that you mentioned before that What If has always had that sort of domestic focus. So I think you would have a really interesting perspective on that question in terms of changes in demand or any sort of interesting or surprising, stats or anything you've seen. What have you seen on your end?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had, as you said, that domestic view, and we've always had a great skew of regional popularity, but definitely during this time, now more than ever. So, that coupled with, a larger variety, I guess, in the types of accommodation being booked as well. People are keen for apartment type stays as well. They might be interested in the more of the farm stay style in the, in a more regional area. But even if it is in a city or a kind of a beach area, apartments are more popular than ever. And, is perhaps one example of, what we're interested to try and help people stay longer in regions as well and kind of support that length of stay. There's always going to be the people that, they want to go to a destination and do that, flop and drop style holiday. They want the room service. They want the easy holiday. Then there is the, and depending on who you are and who the audience is, they want to get further afield and they want to get off the beaten track, and that's really interesting to them. So I think, throughout this time, we've tried to work with our partners in terms of even when we're landing people through to landing pages that showcase these different sorts of accommodation to try and help, I guess, demonstrate the different value of different types of properties across Australia as well. We've spoken a bit about that showcasing of value a bit, and I think particularly now as the pandemic de-escalates, potentially that's where we're getting to now. I kind of hope so, but we want to continue to do that, and it might be a while until we're traveling, internationally to the extent that we were before, and maybe travel will always look different. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know these things, but I think we definitely still have a purpose for ourselves as a brand to help people understand what we have on our doorstep. We do a lot with parents and families and that sort of travel, and we've done some research recently that found that Aussie parents today are far more likely to plan at least one annual domestic family holiday compared to their own parents. So that puts Aussie kids under 13 on track to be the nation's most well domestically travelled and educated generation. So kind of our next local travel experts. And that's just really fascinating, because I think back to, the trips I did around Oz as a kid, definitely I feel like I can count on one hand. Maybe, not even quite that, 1 or 2 trips, but that's just fascinating to me that, these kids are going to have such great knowledge of our country. I think now, especially over, say, school holidays, parents are looking for, if they're feeling comfortable and confident, with the travel situations, it's an opportunity for them to continue that, education with their kids outside of the classroom. So taking them to destinations that, have a great cultural, trip in Alice Springs, and certain experiences you can do there with First Nations people and things like that. So can they do that? Can they get to the Snowy Mountains? That's a really different trip again. Getting to Cairns, to see the rainforests and the reefs. That's really different again. So I think it's a really unique, maybe turning point for us to think about now. It's not just about families getting to the beach at school holidays. It's like, what can they see and explore and have this great moment together as a family traveling around Oz.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting stat and a positive one. It's really pleasing to see that, you know, families are engaging and wanting to see more of the country. And I mean, I grew up always doing the Gold Coast for a vacation, but there's so much more to see in this country. So it's really interesting and surprising, that one. So I guess looking ahead, I mean, it's hard to, obviously, as you mentioned, there's no crystal ball. It's hard to say what it's going to be like, but, you know, we can't assume what the travel industry is going to look like in 5 years, let alone 12 months. But I guess what can brands and partners do to ensure that they can adapt to any changes we might see emerge in the next year or so? Whoever wants to keep.
You know, I'm happy to keep going while I'm at it. You know, I think it's fairly safe to assume we're not going to be in that old normal for a while. And the travel marketplace is going to continue to be noisy about domestic travel. So I think, you know, for us, we're interested in working with partners on different strategies around differentiation, around, you know, personalization for a specific audience and delivering them the product and the destinations that they might be interested in. So just talking, I guess, hopefully more intelligently to different sorts of audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? I agree. I don't think things are ever going to go back to what they were, and maybe that's a good thing in some regards. You know, there's some great points that Amy raised in terms of people seeing more of Australia and being more versed about the culture and what we have to offer. I suppose for Trip.com, it's definitely going to be more of a mobile focus. I know Australians have always been a little bit slower to adopt mobile and app than the rest of the world. So I think that's something that's definitely accelerated, and that's something that we're seeing a big shift on. That's something we're going to continue working on and looking for partners to support us on that. Like, how can we, you know, work with app to app with different partners? How can we expand in terms of, like, essentially, like, we see more loyalty, we see more frequent usage, we see higher revenue from app, because it's something that someone's invested to have this on their phone once they get to that stage. So it's something that's maybe a little bit more difficult. It's maybe not the first booking, maybe it's the third booking by the time they're actually comfortable to have the app on their phone. But it's having that and that mobile connection with that user. It's not just about them booking that trip with us. It's about them thinking about it and planning with us. And then when they're actually in destination, experiencing, like, well, Australia at the moment, like a tourist, and, you know, booking their tours and looking at things to do and what's the weather going to be in this destination. And so we really strive hard to have all these amazing features within the app. So it's like pre, during, and post as well, if they want to leave reviews, if they want to tell us how it was, and that enhances the experience for themselves, but other users as well, to come back and understand and book on mobile. So yeah, that's definitely going to has been our focus and will continue to be as well. And I think that's getting a real shift for Australians that are going to be more comfortable with that now.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Sophie? What advice would
Yeah.
you give partners or brands there?
Yeah, so I think it's the same with any category slows down. It's just making sure that you're at the forefront of the return growth, and that might mean that you have to work harder or work smarter. But I think it's also about making sure that you don't sort of set and forget and wait for it to come back, but just using that time to accelerate and own it. I think is just super important. It's just about being continuously aware and sort of developing and building up the strategy.
Definitely. So to wrap up, I did have one final question that, Sophie, you can kick us off with, but it's the question we're all asking each other: where are you going to go when we can finally travel normally again?
Yeah, I think mine's probably an obvious one. Would love to go back to the UK to see my family. Maybe sneak in a cheeky trip to Europe somewhere, but yeah, that's what good to see.
What about you, Joanne?
Yeah, I'm actually still keen to see lots of Australia. So I think my next trip, or well, even if things are normal, I don't think it'll ever be normal, really super normal like it was before. So NT, we're probably hoping to plan and go to soon. I've actually never been. So even though I'm a North Queenslander, it should have been relatively close growing up. It's a big state. So NT is going to be like a new one for me, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, my partner's Italian, so it'd actually be amazing to get back to Italy and Ischia and to be reunited with family. I think that's going to be for a lot of people. That was what we saw when New Zealand opened. They're the first people to go, visiting friends and relatives. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the first people that go to these countries when we can travel overseas again.
Absolutely.
I think I'd probably be a similar sort of, I want the best of both worlds. So I definitely, COVID's given me time to put that large domestic travel wish list together, that I've potentially not, really done before. So very keen to get to Kangaroo Island in South Australia and do the Coral Coast in WA. Definitely top of the list. And I think after that, further afield, Korea, South Korea, for a wonderful foodie experience. I'm very jealous because I know lots of people that have been. So I think I'm keen to get around to that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
let's hope that's not too far off for when we can travel normally again. So to wrap up, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to you all for joining me for the discussion today. There was a lot of really interesting insights and perspectives there. So we really appreciate you joining us for Global Partnership Day. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more great sessions coming up.